numbers are starting to taper out, so I think let's get started. Welcome everyone and good morning. Welcome to our first webinar virtual meetup with Brex. I'm going to hand it off to now Derek and David to get us started.
Hey everyone, I'm David. I'm an engineer at Retool. It's really nice to meet everyone. We're super fortunate to have an hour of Derek's time today. Derek is an engineering manager at Brex, and Retool has been sort of part of the Brex growth story. We're really excited to dig in and chat with Derek today. Just quick admin item before, we will set aside the last 15 minutes or so for questions. If you message on the Zoom chat feature, that message will go directly to the host, Aaron, of the conversation. And so no one else will be able to see that message. So feel free to send your questions through the Zoom chat throughout the whole conversation, and then we'll queue them up at the end for Derek. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So the title of this talk is How Internal Tools Helped Brex Hyperscale. So Brex has been an incredible growth story, and Retool has been privileged to be a part of that from the early days. And Derek was sort of a very early engineer at Brex. So we'll sort of be diving into how Brex thought about internal tooling and how internal tooling sort of help them scale incredibly quickly. So with that, Derek, if you could very briefly introduce yourself, maybe what you do at Brex and how long you've been there, and we'll get started.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you so much, David. So thanks guys for joining this, and thanks for taking the time to hear a little bit about our story. So yeah, my name is Derek. I'm today an engineering manager at Brex, and I have managed a different set of different teams here already, including our dashboard team, our mobile app team, and our tooling team as well. At this point, I have been at Brex for 2 years, almost 2 years, completing 2 years in September. It's very interesting. When I joined Brex, we were 35 people. We fit inside my apartment right now, and it was very, very interesting to see this growth, because now we are 400 plus people, and it was absolutely incredible to see the growth, and I have just learned so much. Prior to Brex, I was already on payments, and I was working in Brex founder's previous company in Brazil called Pagarme, where I learned all the base of payments and the financial market as well. My last job there was as well an engineering manager working on their dashboard product. And there will be a very interesting link that we're gonna make a little bit in the future on this. I work in a variety of different things throughout my career. I have developed firmware systems. I have developed communication protocols. I have worked on hardware. I have worked on front end and mobile apps. I have done basically a little bit of everything. And I really love being able to help the company in any way I can with my knowledge. And tools is just one of them as well that I really enjoy. Yeah, this is a little bit about me. Anything else that I missed?
Yeah, so Derek, I think also for folks on the call, can you maybe tell us just very briefly what Brex does and sort of what the mission of the company is and things like that?
For sure. Yeah. So, Brex started when I joined as the first corporate card for startups. So Brex, basically, the biggest contribution of Brex, in my opinion, is a big disruption in how credit cards are underwritten for companies. Underwriting in general is a very old process that hasn't changed a lot in the past years. And I think that Brex came to basically break the paradigm that the market was just using, right? Nowadays, Brex has grown to become what we call the financial operating system for growing businesses. And our goal is to help every single growing business to realize their full potential. And we want to make finance a self-driving finance for teams. So companies can focus, especially startups and growing businesses, can focus on their business instead of focusing on finance. As you grow, and we know that because we are now a much bigger company than we were, finance starts to get really complicated, especially with expense management, right? For employees. Like, you want to give a credit card for all your employees, and you want them to be able to self-drive their expenses. Like who never worked in this company where every end of month you have to file a spreadsheet full of receipts and you move all these files, you have to snap pictures of all the receipts in the end of the month, and that's kind of like a burden. And that is consuming valuable time from all your employees. So Brex wants to come here and improve the life of your employees, being those employees the people expensing money on behalf of the company, or being those employees the finance team that has to review all of these expenses and maybe export these expenses to your NetSuite ERP or any other ERP. So we really want to make finance be self-driving, and that's the goal of Brex.
Awesome. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here, by the way, so that everybody can actually see you talking, Derek. There we go. Brex has experienced pretty incredible growth over the last 3 years or so. So I think Brex is valued at like 2.6 billion. I think you guys are a few hundred people. How big is the engineering team right now? And can you talk a little bit about how, some of the challenges you faced as you were scaling that team?
Sorry, I was muted. So yeah, for sure. We are around 100 engineers today on the engineering team, distributed across 15 different teams. So it's much bigger. When I joined, we were one team. Engineering was probably around 10. And so nowadays we're basically 10 times that. With regards to the growth, I think it's very, very interesting. I have never been part of such a hyper growth company in the past, right? So that's my first experience here. And one thing that I can say for sure is that I'm very hungry for learning. I'm learning every day, and this is what I want to keep doing for the rest of my life. I want to learn every day, right? And I feel that at Brex, this has never been a problem. I am pushed to learn every day, and I have never learned so much being in a company that hyperscales. It has been an amazing trajectory for me, both in my career, but also like as a manager nowadays, seeing how much we can empower and how much we trust people at Brex and how much that was important for us to scale the company. This is something that I paraphrase all the time from Brex since the very beginning of my days there. We hire people for them to make decisions for Brex. We don't hire people to tell them what to do. And this is the biggest thing for me at Brex. Since the very first day that I joined, I was empowered to make decisions on behalf of the company, which makes me afraid every day, but also makes me happy because I feel empowered to make changes and to improve the company overall. So I think that this is what enabled Brex to grow. A very, very strong trust with everybody in the company, and everybody that joins the company has this trust to be able to deliver. And to me, that is the biggest learning that I have. And I have never been so happy with such a crazy growth to me.
And Derek, I think a lot of people here have interacted maybe with the Brex product, see what sort of the customer facing side of Brex is. But as we both know, there's a lot going on under the hood. And so I'd love to maybe hear you start to talk about how Brex thinks about building product versus building sort of internal tooling. Do you guys sort of split engineering teams across those different functions? And how do you guys think about that?
Cool, yeah. So I think I want to take a step back to kind of explain how we organize teams at Brex. And so the first thing is, there's 15 engineering teams, 15 plus that I mentioned, they're all full-fledged, full-stack teams. And so they are responsible for the entire end-to-end experience of the product that they work on. And so let's say you work on the application flow. So you own the entire backend for the application flow. You own the entire front end for that, the entire mobile app for that, and also the tools. And the reason why we did that is we realized that this is the best model since the team level is where the domain knowledge is the freshest and the strongest, right? I know that like in the past, I have seen companies having a tooling team that creates tools for other teams. But we don't believe that that kind of works because that requires lots of cross communication and context sharing. And so we believe that this squad model, just like Spotify created, is the best model for that. So basically, engineers are responsible for building tools as well. And the main difference to me between the two of them is building tools is much easier because the customer is basically on the same company. It's an internal customer. You make a Zoom call with them, you ask questions, you drag and drop Retool components to make it better for them, and the feedback cycle is very fast. Now, with regards to the difference between creating products and tools, right? So they are treated differently. If you ask me this question, I will say yes and no. So no, because we put as much effort in creating great tooling than we put in creating great products. Because we believe that tooling is part of the product, right? If you have great tooling, your operations team will have a better response time for our customers. Your customer support team will have a better response time for our customers. And your engineering team will have better response times on incidents and any other problems, right? So we put as much effort in building tools than we put in building products. And so where is the different part then? So basically the difference is product has a much stricter review cycle where we have design review, we have product review, and tooling don't have these review processes. It's much more iterative. And because it's not like a public thing, right? We can make changes in a much faster way. You can connect with a customer support agent or an operations person and just make the changes on the fly. And that is a much faster and better way to work on tools. So to me, that's the fundamental part between product development and tooling development.
Great. And I think, you guys made a very early decision to sort of go with a particular strategy for internal tools. I think a lot of companies face the trade-off of, do we invest a lot in building custom applications, for our internal tools, or go with sort of a vendor? How did you guys think about that decision early on at Brex? And how's that sort of panned out over the last few years?
Yeah. So I think first of all there's a fundamental part of building tools that comes even before the choice of how you're going to do it, right? So I want to start with the why. So at Brex, we believe that we are a software company, right? We don't believe that Brex is going to scale with people, right? That's not how we're going to scale the company. If our operations team is based on Excel spreadsheets and a Dropbox folder where you drop files and that's how you coordinate things, and then creating tickets against engineering to execute things directly on a database, that's not how you're going to scale. You need to empower people. And I'm going to come back to that. You need to empower people to make decisions and to execute things. And so in the very early days of Brex, we were like, you know what, we're going to scale. We are going to be a big company. We are going to be a big company. And because of that, we want to invest in tools, in automated tools, so we empower teams to make these decisions without having to rely on engineering to do those. So, that's the overall thinking of why you should build tools in the beginning of your company. If you are ambitious, if you're going to scale your company, you should probably build tools in the beginning because your operations people are going to be much more effective. Your customer support team is going to be much more effective, and they're going to be able to give a very good treatment for your customers. And so that's the why. Now on the how. So yeah, as you mentioned, we decided very early in the process to create these tools in Brex. And I think that we had the experience at Pagarmi in the past of building tools. So for context, I worked at Pagarmi for 2 years before I joined Brex. And we were at a point where we were scaling the company very, very aggressively at that time. We had around again, 10 times the scale in the company in the period that I was there. And we were at a point we didn't have much internal tools. So the way that we did at Pagarmi was we had the customer dashboard and we had another deployment of the same code base, which we call the admin dashboard. And the admin dashboard lived in a separate deployment, of course. And this deployment had additional things. So the customer support agent or the operations agent, they could impersonate the user and they could make operations on behalf of the users and even advanced operations, additional buttons on the dashboard, as we say. So that was the strategy that we went in there. The difference is we had a very high cost of operation on that because first it was a layer on top of the existing dashboard. So engineers always had to use lots of caution to not show an operation that was an administrative operation for our customers. So that imposed a lot of additional work when you're developing a front end. And what we ended up doing over time was to deprecate that and move over to dedicated tools. And at that time, we were building at Pagarmi a component library, a design system, and we were recreating our dashboard from scratch. And so I saw the opportunity at that time to build a framework for creating dashboards. So instead of just creating the Pagarmi dashboard, why not create a tool that you can run a command line? And this command line basically bootstraps a new dashboard with a login page, with some charts, some tables, some details screens, and all of those things that basically every tool kind of needs to have, right? And we spent quite some engineering resources in that, and we were pretty successful in general. Our operations team at Pagarmi had a couple engineers dedicated to it, and they created amazing tools for chargebacks, for fraud detection, all using these dashboards. And the problem is we ended up with 15 different code bases to maintain now. And then every time that you update a component on the library, that has the potential to break all of these tools. Because one more time, tools don't have the much rigor that product has. And so maybe they don't use the right patterns. Maybe they don't focus on making the components reusable. Maybe they don't focus on code quality as much, right? Maybe they don't have testing as well. And so it started to get really, really hard to manage that. And so when I joined Brex, I was absolutely mind blown because Retool, I didn't even know that Retool existed. I knew Retool when I joined Brex, and I was absolutely mind blown. For context, before I joined Brex, I was helping a friend on his company called PageDraw. And PageDraw is an online design editor that you can drag and drop components, just like Retool. And but the difference is that it compiles React code. So basically, you can build your own UI in there, export React code, and then just hook that to calls to your administrative systems. And then when I joined Brex, I saw Retool, and I was like, oh wow, that makes so much more sense because it's very tied to one specific use case, and it solves a very well scoped problem of internal tools. I was absolutely mind blown. And I think it was the right decision for Brex because with my previous experience, seeing how much time, how much resources we have spent building internal tools by writing code, we spent just so much time and so much money. And for sure, the returns are still valid. I still think that we had lots of returns by building these tools because the end user experience is what I personally care about. And if we are providing a great user experience, that's great. But if I could use these resources to build products, to build other things, to improve these tools even further, I would. And so when I joined Brex, I was very happy to see that I was able to create a page. So when I joined Brex, we didn't have a way to simulate transactions. And I was like, hey, I'm working on the dashboard and I need to like simulate all these types of transactions. So I sit with the guy that understood everything about this. And I opened Retool and I started dragging and dropping components and building queries and building REST API calls. And in literally 30 minutes, we created the simulator. And that unblocked my next work, which was simulating all types of transactions. Decline transactions, clear transactions, and chargebacks, refunds, and all of this. And so it was really, really good to be able to be fast when doing this. Something that I would have to make like a CLI tool. And if I make a CLI tool, I would benefit only myself. But that page became a page that was used every day by every single engineer. And that is absolutely amazing to me, how fast we were able to build a tool that unblocked me and then unblocked the rest of engineering moving forward as well.
It's really cool to hear sort of the origin story of how you were thinking about these things and the fact that you were at Pagarmi and then went to Brex and took a lot of the learnings from there. It's super interesting. Can we maybe fast forward to today and talk a little bit about sort of how is Retool used at Brex, both from a sort of architectural perspective, from a technical perspective, as well as from on the business side, sort of what does the deployment look like at Brex? Who uses Retool? And how many apps do you guys have? Things like that.
For sure. So let's talk about customers first. So at Brex, basically every team is a customer of our tools. Every operations, customer support, and sales agents use Retool. Retool is Retool is the main tool of our tools are the main tool of work for all these people. You know, let's say one example, you call in and you are in an airport, you are a founder, you are at an airport and you just lost your flight and you can't refund that. You need to buy a new ticket. And that's very expensive because you need to buy a ticket for today, right? And but for some reason you don't have limit anymore. And but like you were stuck in the airport, right? Um, you will call Brex and you'll say, hey, look, I'm this person and I am stuck at the airport. This is my case. So the first thing that is going to happen is the customer support agent is going to open our user search page, as we call. And they're going to type your name or they're going to type your email or they're going to type their phone number, whatever information we have from you, they're going to type in the search. That is going to bring a table where they can see details about your user and your company and everything about you and your company at Brex. And they will navigate into the administrative functions where they can create, for your user, limit override, let's say, right? And they are going to allow that specific merchant to pass the next transaction for you. And so all of this, they're going to be able to do by clicking very intuitive UIs and buttons. And probably this problem is going to be solved for you in less than 3 minutes. In less than 3 minutes, because the tools are just so much easy to use, right? And in the same call, the customer support agent is going to say, hey, can you try again? And if you try again, it's going to go through. So customer support agent is, they use Retool extensively all the day, but also operations. So let's say you apply to Brex and you fell into manual review, which is one of the steps that we have as well, right? So the agents have a page where they can review your company details. They can request for more information. Let's say your bank connection didn't work. We need to ask for some statements from you. They have this page where they can drag and drop the statements on, and that is going to trigger the system that analyzes the statement and do the underwriting for you. And so operations people also use it. And sales agents. So sales agents, what they're going to do, maybe an account management person is going to look into your company and see if maybe they need to provide you some, if they can provide you Brex exclusive, or if they can provide you some other benefits as well as part of your account. And also they can see how is the health of your account and provide some insights as well on how can you manage your business. So every single person at Brex is a customer of our tools. For engineering, it's very interesting because engineering is, Retool is great for engineering because it's great for quick prototyping. So, a couple of days ago, I wanted to know some information about push notifications and how many of them were failing and how many of them were not going through. We had this dashboard with SLAs and SLOs, but I wanted to dive deep into the information. So what I did, I go into the Retool, I create a page that I just drag and drop a couple of components in there and I can do my exploration there. And once I have that, I share the link with somebody else and somebody else can see that same information. So it's also very great for prototyping in general. It's a great discovery tool, in my opinion. So that's where engineering also plays a role in here. So that's the customer part. Now let's talk about the architecture part. We learned a lot since we started working with tools. And that would be applicable to any other system that we use to create tools. But Retool is the system we use today. So the first part is we're a financial company and we need to have a very tight control over who can do what. And so historically, when we started Brex, we had a very thin system that would proxy RPC calls into services and execute operations directly by calling these APIs. So at Brex, we use gRPC and Protobuf as our RPC system today. And so basically Retool would be calling those directly. So we had this proxy layer that would call that. But over time, as compliance come, we had to tighten the systems down. And so today, the system that we use is called Admin API v2. And Retool has support for this amazing thing called GraphQL. And so all the administrative APIs that we have go through this system called admin API. And admin API is a GraphQL API. And you might be asking, why not, HTTP? Why not any other thing? Well, GraphQL has a schema. It is type safe and it has completions. So it's very great when you're writing a mutation or a query through in Retool and you start typing things and the completion list appears and you can just like autocomplete and you have this great developer experience in general. So admin API v2 has this ability of translating these GraphQL calls into the gRPC calls. And also reading Retool identity context to be able to identify the user. So we authenticate a user using OAuth 2, which Retool support. And we can basically authorize, not only authenticate, but also authorize the user to do certain operations. And so, for instance, Brex has a much stricter policy. And so every Brex cache operation can only be executed by a specific group of people. And so we use Okta groups to be able to control that. And today our security team is the team that controls access for all of these APIs. And so developers develop that once, and then if an access control request is needed, they go through the security team. And so we have Retool on one end, we have admin API v2 as we call on the other end, and we have all these services that we have. We have over 50 microservices at Brex today. And this is the bridge between Retool and these services. Now for queries, we still use a lot of SQL queries because it's just much faster to use SQL queries. But we have been limiting those only to the data that we feel safe. So we care a lot about our customers' data. And so we have lots of RBAC going on, not only on Retool of what you can see, but also on what you can query for. And so we have a series of Postgres databases, we have a series of Snowflake databases, analytics warehouses, and et cetera. And all of this uses RBAC to be able to restrict what you can see as an agent or as a person as well. Yeah, and I think that that's an overall overview of how we architect Retool.
And one question, Derek, that I think is probably especially relevant to other sort of financial companies is, how do you guys think about security and things like PCI? I know Retool sort of runs on-prem at Brex, but can you talk a little bit about how you guys think about that?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I completely forgot about this one. So because we're a financial company, we couldn't run Retool as a SaaS, right? And that not only applies to Retool. We have many other things running on-prem. And so, yes, we don't have problems with PCI today because we have a PCI infrastructure that is completely isolated from the rest of the system. And very few people has access to that infrastructure. And Retool doesn't have access to PCI infrastructure. And so all the rest of the data Retool has access to, and it never goes outside, right? It always goes on the internal network. Retool has, because we can run on-prem, basically Retool has privileged access to some APIs that only Retool has a port open to them. And so we can ensure very strict security because we are running on-prem. Additionally, by running on-prem, if there is some security vulnerability that got introduced in a new release of Retool, we have the ability of rolling that back very, very fast. And if there is a new version of Retool, we can test on staging deployment, and then we see if everything is good. If everything is good there, then we can promote that to production as well. So because our business depends so much in the tools that we have, if Retool goes down today, Brex is down literally. It's very, very important for us to be able to control this deployment. And so we have our security team running scans on the Docker containers that Retool provides us. We have a very strict set of requirements to ensure the utmost security going on in Retool.
Great. And Derek, I think it'd be really cool to actually see a particular Retool application that you have worked on and built before we dive into questions. So are you able to share your screen and show us an actual Retool app?
For sure, for sure. So this is a very fun one. I want to contextualize you guys about it. So I will start with the problem statement because again, I strongly believe that engineering is a tool to solve business problems. And so if we don't start with the business problem, there's something wrong. And so here's a business problem. As we scaled, we figured that we had 100 plus emails that we send to customers. And those emails were coded in React or coded in embedded Elixir. They were coded like in code. And that created a visibility problem for our marketing team. That created a visibility problem for product. That created a visibility problem for design. And that created a consistency problem because you can do anything with code. And at a certain point in the company, especially as a financial company, you want to pass trust. You need to establish trust with your customers. And if your emails look like unprofessional, you're not going to create this trust. And so we care a lot about creating trust with our customers. And so we came with this system to solve the problem of visibility of emails, like what are the templates that we send? What is the copy? And also the second one, empowerment again. We're gonna, like every time I talk about Brex, I talk about empowering people one more time. And we wanted to empower product design and copywriting to be able to edit those templates. Like, why would a copy change have to go through engineering? It doesn't make sense. We wanted to empower design, product, and copywriting. And so we created a system called a template manager. Template manager is a CMS for emails. And this is what I'm gonna show you guys. Okay, start sharing. Okay, so this is Retool, and this is template manager. It starts empty for sure, and you can see notifications for SMS, you can see notifications for push, and you can see notifications for email. So I'm gonna start with SMS because it's very simple. So on this dropdown, which is basically being fed by Admin API v2, you have all possible types of notifications that we send our customers to. So let's say that you wanna see the limit warning one. You select that one. You have all the versions for this one. So you can see you have only one version. This version is approved. So it's the version that is being used in production right now. You can unapprove that, and that is gonna make the template render fail. And that notification is not gonna be sent anymore. On the left-hand side, you can see the template that we have. So you see we have some calculations, some comparisons here, and we have some copies. So you are approaching your Brex spending limit of format currency limit, code US dollars, your remaining available balances, blah. But if you are a limit type user, we want to send a slightly different message. So you also have the slightly different message here. You can see a preview of your notification. And as you type more things here, you can kind of see the preview of that. And the cool part of this is our copywriting team can be mindful of giant SMS messages. You know, we don't want to send a wall of text to our customers every time that we send an SMS. And being able to see the effect of this here is a very, very important thing. We also have some things like who owns this notification. So if you want to talk to a team about it, you can also see this here. So if they have the delivery deadline, which is if we can't send this notification in this amount of time, just bail out. And you can see other notifications here. Card activation failed. Likewise, no notification data on this one. Now let's move on to push, where things start to get more exciting. And as you can see here on this page, now you have a title and a body as well for this notification. And this one is very simple. The title is always this, and the body is just a message that we received from Brex support. But if you look for transaction approved as well, you can see a bigger message. And you can also see some, you know, if you have a Concur account, this is how we're gonna send you. And if you don't have a Concur account, that is what you're gonna send you. And same likewise for everything else. And the cool thing is because Retool is so dynamic, you can basically do, okay, cool, let me change this to true and see how it goes. Oh, cool, that's how Concur is gonna appear. Now let's see that we have a very, very long merchant name that will make things reflow. And you can test that as well. So very, very fast iteration speed. Once you're done with it, you just save the notification. That is going to trigger an email to the copywriting team, so they can come over here and they can approve or unapprove that version. But that's not all. There's just much more. If we go to email, things start to get very, very interesting. So on email, email is much more complicated because you have an HTML email, right? So you can see how that HTML email looks here. And we can even take like a more complicated email. So let's say the customer email has changed. And you can also see that here. And as you change the values, you can also see these values updating here on this template. And so this empowers teams, copywriting, design, product to come over this and change it and see how it goes and have a very fast preview. They also can see the plain text version of that email. And that's very, very cool. So what are the tech behind it? I think it's important to highlight some of the tech that we're using. So this is the play mode. We're gonna click on edit and we're gonna go into the edit mode. And in edit mode, you can see lots of things going on. So on edit, you can actually drag and drop the components. And I would like to show a couple components that we are using here from Retool that I personally really enjoy. And the first one is custom components. Retool has the ability to have a React component being mounted inside. And so I was not happy enough with a text editor like this, and I wanted to have code highlighting. And Retool didn't have support for that yet. And so what I did was to basically pull here, ACE editor from NPKG and basically mount that React component. So you see ACE editor here, a couple of options being set. And there is some communication going on with Retool to be able to sync information with this custom component. And this provides code highlighting here and features like, indentation when you have the next line here, which is also super cool. What are some of the other cool things that we have here? We do have as well JSON schema form. So Retool has the ability to create dynamic forms, and a dynamic form is basically a JSON schema form. And basically we are building this set of fields dynamically depending on what is coming up. So you can see here that we are using this query called get presentation template, and we are taking the keys of this object and we are using as an enum here. Likewise for this one. So you can interpolate the JSON schema using values coming from queries. And that is very powerful because now let's say this template has I want to override the footer. So I can basically create a new one here. I can call this footer override and I can change the text. And when I save this template now, it's gonna override the footer in here with this content. And this is possible because Retool supports JSON schema, and we said that this is an array field, and every time that you create a new you create a new one, it's going to basically create that entity for you. So JSON schema is also very cool. We use JSON schema in other parts of our product, and it's very nice to have this flexibility. Additionally, we use modals. We want to do more stuff here, like we want to create this as a multi-step flow using some of the new components Retool has, like the wizard component, which is a beta, and you can create multi-step flows. We want to create that as well in this one. So now let's come back into what this means for us, right? We have spent on this page very few time, like very few amount of time. Very little. And like compared to how much time we would spend in code, right? There's still code here for sure. This is code, and the queries are code. The transformers are code. But if we were to code this from scratch, we would have to make decisions like, okay, cool. What is the component library that we're gonna use? Are we gonna use Create React App? Are we gonna use AngularJS? What is the repo where we're gonna put this on? And all of these things that we would have to figure out. And so we didn't spend lots of time in this one. And what is the outcome of this tool? The outcome of this tool is that we have reduced in 75% the amount of code that you have to write to ship a notification. Because now to ship a notification, you just create a new template here. You type your things, and you will get a new UID that you can use in your code to call that notification, right? So we have reduced in 75% the amount of code needed to ship a notification. That translates in engineering velocity. That translates in more time to be able to ship great products. And this is what we are about. And that's why we really love building tools. We want to ease the process of building great products for our customers.
I'm actually very glad that Derek decided to show this page specifically, because I was the one who had to create few email notifications before we had Retool in place. Let me tell you, that was quite an experience, because you had to change like 9 different files, because we're using good development practices here, right? So single responsibility principle, so it's separated, not just shoved into one file. You would have to go through review, and that's owned by different teams. Then you would wait for deployment to go through to staging, and then production, and then it would become live. And you would also need to go through that maybe a little simplified process just to change a template. You want to change header from H1 to H2, you go through all that process again. Now you just click and that's it. And you just needed one, engineering effort once to create that page. Now anyone in the company with the right permissions can do that, not just engineering, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we have the review process as well, where the copywriting team has to approve templates. And that's very important for us, so we keep consistent messaging as well. Yeah, thanks for adding that.
Hey, Derek, one quick question that we got about the tool that you showed. It looked like it was talking to both Postgres as well as GraphQL. Can you just maybe briefly talk about, like, do you guys connect directly to databases like for read operations, and then all writes and mutations happen through GraphQL? Or how does Retool plug into your underlying sort of system of record across all your databases and APIs?
Very good question. Very good question. So also very nice that somebody spotted that. Sure, we do. So here's the trade-off we made. All reads. So the database that we have is a read-only replica. It's not production database, it's a replica. And it's a read-only replica. No inserts, no updates are allowed in there. And so reads go through Postgres and writes go through GraphQL, as you mentioned. Now we are in the process now of creating the next version of this, because we believe that going through GraphQL would be much better for a couple of reasons. First is API stability. Databases are not an API. Databases are a data store, right? And teams are gonna make changes. Teams are gonna create migrations. Teams are gonna change column types. Teams are gonna make changes, and they're gonna break this API. Sometimes the breakage is gonna be great because they're gonna delete a column and the page is gonna crash. And that's great because we detected it. Now the problem is when the column is not deleted and you add a new column and you start using the new one, you deprecate the old one, and the page never breaks. And the information is now just out of date, right? And so we want to move to a world where we do have APIs, and APIs are the stability guarantees. One very good thing about Admin API v2 that we got is testing, because we can't, like, these tools can't break in production, right? And so we have unit testing for these APIs, integration testing for these APIs, where every time that you change an API that tools depend on, for mutations in this case, you're gonna run the tests on the CI, and we're gonna find out if that API broke for Retool or not. We wanna bring the same level to queries. And we are in the process of moving queries away from Postgres direct queries to GraphQL queries, so we can have stability. Now, that doesn't mean that we are gonna stop making SQL queries. We still wanna be able to make queries, but I think there are contexts, right? For any tool that is a critical path for our business, you should be using stable APIs like Admin API v2. For anything that is engineering, let's say you're creating an investigation tool for an incident, or you are creating an investigation tool for your curiosity, you should be able to use database. The second one is understanding the database is great. It's a great proxy for understanding entities of a service. And we don't want to take this away from engineers, but we do want to take this away from production tools, because production tools deserve the high quality of stable APIs.
Great. We're going to transition over to questions now. Everyone's been asking great questions throughout the whole chat in Zoom. If you do have any, please send them over in the Zoom chat. That'll go directly to the hosts. So I think Jamie's been working on organizing a few of those. And Jamie, do you want to kick off some of those questions?
Great. Yeah. So one question so far has been about how Retool has helped Brex use fraud. So Derek, I think the attendee was asking if you could talk a little bit about kind of some of the fraud tools, how that works, and Retool at Brex.
Yeah, for sure. So we do have a fraud investigation tool, which I'm not able to show you guys, unfortunately. We do have fraud investigation tools. We have fraud chain detection tools. And so the way that Retool helped us here is to create a single view about something, right? So let's say you have found that this transaction on this card is maybe fraud, right? You can put this transaction in the investigation tool. It's gonna find that transaction across all Brex companies. And we're gonna be able to understand if that is a merchant problem or if that is a really fraud ring. And Retool has helped us a lot with creating these dashboards very quickly when we have such type of incident. You can clone the existing dashboard. You can modify it to be able to detect this new type of fraud, right? Sometimes fraudsters get really creative, but they forget that we are creative as well. And we are gonna get creative to find out what is going on. And we have been able to catch some very interesting patterns in the past using the fraud investigation tool. For sure, having a single point where you can see everything as the big picture has helped us on that.
Awesome. One other question is kind of around a little bit more on the architecture here, around basically how you maintain the API endpoints to feed Retool, how it hooks into HubSpot, and then kind of basically how you're using sort of GraphQL and Retool. You want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So one strong thing at Brex is that we already use GraphQL for our mobile app and our dashboard. So we are very seasoned on GraphQL, and we really understand what are the benefits that we get from it. And so nowadays we use Elixir, as you guys probably know, and we use this library called Absinthe to create the GraphQL server. And we created an architecture in the admin API v2 where each team has a directory and they own all their APIs. So again, one more time, we want to empower teams. The tools team my team doesn't have to review anything. We don't have to approve pull requests on that. As long as teams are adding tests for their support endpoints, as we call, and they're conforming to the patterns that we use. They're using authentication and authorization in the right ways, which we provide libraries for. They're free to make their changes. And there isn't much secret, to be frank. We do use Okta to do authentication and authorization. So Retool has integration with Okta. Every time that you open a page that depends on it, Retool is going to say, hey, do an auth flow here with your admin API. Click on a button that authenticates you. And that now includes the token that we use to authenticate you against admin API v2. We also keep a mapping between a Retool user and an internal user. And we stuff what we call an internal user context in the gRPC calls that we send to services. And services define if they're going to accept that request or not. Additionally, we have created an audit system where we use this identity context to be able to identify who is performing an action. And it's virtually impossible for you to tamper the system. It's virtually impossible. Unless you have access to the machine that runs admin API v2, it's virtually impossible. And you also have to have some secrets that, it's not very easy to obtain if you log into the machine. And so, yeah, this is, I think, a little bit more deep dive in that. But teams are free to make calls to whatever service. If that service is Salesforce or HubSpot, they can make calls from admin API v2, or they can make these calls inside their own services. Some teams, for instance, are sending notifications to Slack. We have an internal notification system, microservice at Brex, And some services call this other service to send internal notifications to Slack. So there isn't much secret. Again, my team is the tooling platform team. And our goal is to provide a platform for teams to be empowered to create tools in any way they want. We provide admin API, infrastructure, authentication, authorization libraries, some macros to ease the process of importing enums and importing types from gRPC and protobuf. But other than that, teams are responsible for their own things. And that's really, really important for Brex to scale.
Yeah, related to that last point, somebody was asking around kind of how you have kind of own Retool at Brex, sort of how you set up the team structure around it. I know, you, Nick, Roy, Pix have done an amazing job kind of creating the core infrastructure. How would you recommend kind of other teams look at adopting kind of Retool at different companies and the kind of ownership of the tool?
Very good question. So as we scaled in the beginning, Nick was doing many of our tools, and Pix and Roy were doing many of those tools. But as we scaled, we found that the most value that we could give users would be, first, finding patterns that we are having to re-implement all the time. And we worked very close with Retool. Again, we have a very nice relationship with you guys, and we really appreciate that partnership, where we brought this point of like, hey, we have a search box for users coded in 5 different pages. And each page is using a different way. Each page has different user experience. And so, hey, it would be really cool to have a usable component. And so Retool announced for us a couple of weeks ago, hey, here's a beta for reusable components or Retool modules. And we were already thinking of, cool, now as an infrastructure team, we will need to start building those components. Everybody needs a user search. Everybody needs a company search. Everybody needs a box that show all details about a company. And you want to use this information in multiple different places without having to copy and paste queries. And it's even harder, right? Like to find where is this being used across all the pages. So our team has been working on providing tools to investigate performance, so teams can improve the performance of their pages. We are providing tools for teams to understand where a query is being used across different pages. So if they're migrating an API and they're breaking compatibility, they can understand what pages are going to be affected by it. We have provided tools for auditing who is making changes and who is clicking on, on specific buttons. And we also created this thing that I think was a fundamental and very important thing. We have more than 100 pages today in Retool. And it was very hard for a user to report an issue. They would go to the tools channel on Slack and they would report the issue in there. And we would be like, oh, okay, who owns this page? And so we did a big effort on the last quarter to identify owners of pages. And we added a header on each page saying who is the team that owns that page and what is the Slack channel that you can go to get support about that page. And that helped a lot with routing, that helped a lot with speed. Because when you find an issue, if you have to route that issue through 4 different teams, that is going to be very ineffective. So we created lots of leverage by assigning clear owners and creating and establishing the communication channels on the pages itself. Now, what are the next steps for us? Continue providing a very good infrastructure, a set of usable components, and documentation for onboarding new engineers. At this point, our tools are so complicated, and it's inherently complicated due to our business, that it's very important for us to educate new engineers on how to retool. And we've been working to create that. A set of usable components, clear patterns for people to use, and great infrastructure for teams to create great tools.
Awesome. We have time for one last question, and then you can get in touch with us. We'll also put up some contact info here at the end on sort of how to get in touch with our team to answer any other unanswered questions. But the last question was around security. So I want to understand kind of Retool support of multi-factor, kind of how data security works in Retool. I think one important point to sort of talk about here is that Retool isn't a system of record. sort of a system engagement that, all your data is stored into your databases or your third-party services. And so I think they were curious about how you think about security within the context of Retool.
Yeah. So yeah, as you mentioned, I think it's important to make it clear. Retool doesn't save any information on it about users, customers. There's no customer data in Retool. If you look into Retool database, the only thing you're gonna find in there are the pages and the audit that Retool has, and users, groups, and all of that, right? Retool is not the system of record. That's a very, very important thing to highlight. Around security, again, as I already mentioned, Admin API v2 provides you authentication and authorization, so you understand what group that user is, and you can revoke access to a specific part of the system for them. Additionally to that, I think there are some questions around, for instance, sensitive information, right? And for cache, for instance, right? Some pages, they can only be accessed by people on cache. And the resources, the databases for cache, for instance, are only accessible for these people as well. And this is kind of like how we approach the security model. For tables that you shouldn't be able to access, we also restrict access to them. So let's say there is a table that has all the transactions for that customer, and you don't want a specific group to be able to see, we restrict access of that specific table to a group. But Retool is the surface where you can see lots of information coming from the database. And so we don't want to, it's a trade-off to me. If you remove information from Retool, from our tools, you're going to make it less useful. And we don't want to make the tools less useful. So it's important for us to create controls around who can access the data, as opposed to removing the data completely from the database. And that's how we've been approaching that. Again, we trust a lot the people that work at Brex. We do have the right controls in place. We do restrict who can access the data, but we trust a lot the people on our team to make the right decisions. And if we don't provide the right data for them, we don't expect them to make right decisions. So trust is very, very important. And everybody that needs to access specific data, they are screened as well. So we have a screening process that is part of our compliance team, where we screen people before they join Brex to ensure that they have all the records are green on them. And so also that's another thing that we do a lot in here. Not sure if there is any other specifics on this question.
Everyone, thank you so much. I know we're really running up on time, so I know everyone has meetings after this, so I just want to say thank you, Derek. Wow, what an amazing presentation. All of you, thank you who came to this webinar and virtual meetup. If you have other questions, here's a link to booking with us one-on-one. It's calendly.com/retool/personal demo. We'll send this out in the email that goes after this event. And we will also offer free 5K in Retool Cloud credits for those of you who attended. So we'll be reaching out again. Thank you again so much to everyone who attended, and I'll let you now go on to your next meetings.
Thank you everybody for your time. And if you're interested on Brex, careers.brex.com, and
Awesome. Thank you, everyone.